program. I did say earlier on that apart from the first two sets of guests we had on the program who kind of set the pace, talking about elimination of violence against women, that we have another key player in the state when it comes to combating violence. I'm talking about the foreigner of FEYReP, Mrs. Ime Inyang. Thank you so much for joining us on Center Point EM45. And FEYReP is a pet project of Her Excellency, the wife of the governor, which simply signifies Family Empowerment and Youth Reorientation Path Initiative. So let's set the ball rolling right ahead. First of all, when we're talking about violence, tackling violence, what are those forms of violence?
Thank you very much. We're talking about rape, for instance. We're talking about domestic violence, for instance. We're talking about assault. It could be verbal, it could be physical. We're talking about it could be, we're talking about abuses of all form. We're talking about emotional abuse, and we're talking about defilement, we're talking about incest, and a whole lot of it.
Okay.
A whole lot of it.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, recently, of course, you know that Akwa Ibom, the domesticated verb law of Akwa Ibom State has even expanded the scope of gender-based violence to cover a whole lot more. With, I'm sure, lawyers and people in that category will be able to give us the details and take us through, but I'm just giving you an overview.
Yeah, we just had the president of FEYReP.
Oh, she was here. That's good. I'm sure she did a good job on that. Yeah.
Okay. Now, when we're talking about violence, is the fight just focused on what's being done against women? Is it just the women?
Gender does not connote women only. Gender is talking about both male and female. Even though we don't have many of such cases, but sometimes men are also victims of violence.
Okay.
And that's why the law is talking about violence against persons prohibition. Do you understand? So it's not necessarily about women only, even though we tend to have women coming up as a greater number of those on the receiving end when it comes to gender-based violence.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the 16 days activism campaign against violence began on the 25th, which was the International Day for Elimination of Violence Against Women. What has FEYReP done with regards its objectives of adding value to lives of people in the state? What has FEYReP done with this regard? So
of course, you know that apart from the instruments of the law in the fight against gender-based violence, advocacy is much of what we have to do to create awareness, to sensitize the people, and to encourage survivors of this act to speak out, because perpetuity is shrouded in silence. And so if people are fully aware that if you're courageous enough to speak out, there are people out there willing to support you, and that the government has a tool that can help you get justice. At least that will help you to have some kind of closure, if nothing else. I want to believe that slowly and with time, people will be deterred in perpetuating violence against violence on the gender line, so to speak. And again, each time you start the pursuit of an idea or an issue, sometimes you may not envisage all the challenges that may come up along the line of that fight. But as you move, you will encounter challenges and you will deal with it as it comes. Now, the new instrument is the instrument of naming and shaming, which is about the next step that is believed will further help to deter the perpetrators of gender violence from continuing in this act. So I believe that advocacy, coupled with the instrument of the law, and then the awareness in our society, in our community, to the vulnerable, to the perpetrators, will help discourage some of these forms of violence.
Okay. Now, to what extent has FEYReP helped in disseminating this information, especially at the grassroots?
Of course, the people in the rural areas may not have access to TVs, but they have access to radio. And severally we've been on radio to discuss this same subject matter way back before the VAP law was domesticated or in Akwa Ibom State. We've also gone on open air campaign. Her Excellency herself has taken the campaign to our community leaders. The other time she was in the House of Chiefs, paramount rulers and clan heads.
Okay, I can see a photograph here. This should be when she was in Abuja.
Well, this is when she went for the Governor's Wives Association of Nigeria's forum.
Okay.
As part of the activity on the gender-based 16-day activism week.
Okay.
She was there to also contribute her quota.
Okay.
And of course, you know that she is known to be in the forefront of the fight against gender-based violence. And so there's no way such meetings will hold without her being there to contribute her own quota and to also intimate them with the progress she's making in her own domain in this fight.
Okay.
So that's the picture that we're seeing there. She's been to, like I was telling you, she's been to stakeholders, she's been to communities, spoken to chiefs, spoken to first responders in GBV matters. When I'm talking about GBV, we are abbreviating gender-based violence. When we're talking about first responders, we're talking about the police, we're talking about health workers, we're talking about all the formations that deal with these issues, just to educate them on what is to be done and not to be done when such a matter is reported.
Okay.
And she's still doing a lot more. Of course, from time to time she will let out a cry on the streets of Uyo so that everyone will be aware that this menace is going on in our society. Parents, you have to be more careful in raising your children. Your neighbors, you have to be careful with your neighbors. The neighbors have to be aware that there may be predators like that, and so you have to learn to be your neighbors' children keepers.
Okay.
And if the message is that it is a communal responsibility if we have to succeed in this fight. Everybody in the community has a duty and has a responsibility, and if we all put hands together, then we're sure to get there on time and well too.
Okay. So far, from the reports you get, from your personal assessment, could you say progress is being made? Are we on the road to making progress?
Oh, a whole lot of progress is being made. I remember when we first, when Her Excellency first raised this issue, and she decided to march on the streets of Rio to raise awareness of what was going on in our society. And we started the Girls Uphold Your Dignity program, where we're going to secondary schools to educate the girls on what to do and what not to do, and what to do in the face of GBV.
Okay.
And the girls were anxious and they were very enthusiastic. Sometimes we'll stay in our office and we'll get a call. This is what happened to me. And we'll mobilize to go there. And by the time you get there, you won't see anybody. You call the number, the girl said, my mother says I should not talk. So we had to grapple with the issue of breaking the culture of silence, removing the issues of stigmatization on survivors, as we call them, of these issues. And before long, it was no longer a struggle to get people to come out to report that I have been raped. It was no longer an issue for you to get people willing on their own to follow up for justice. And so I believe that right there, there's a progress. We have started the process of gradually eliminating the culture of silence in the fight against GBV. Number 2, I would say that we have made progress because in the course of pursuing justice, of following up on justice for our survivors, we have actually gotten judgment that has penalized the perpetrators by way of jail terms and stuffs like that. So on the whole, when you look at it, you will believe, like I do, that we have made progress. Parents are learning how not to send their children out on errands at odd times now. Parents are learning how not to leave their children with neighbors without a check, because that is what Her Excellency herself, in going to churches to advocate, was passing across to families, to people. If you have no capable hand to look after your child, please take your child to wherever you're going to. It's better than leaving your child only to come back and find out that the child has been damaged. So mothers know it, rural dwellers know it, that such a menace is going on right now in our society. And even though you cannot be careful enough, but they're trying to be careful.
Okay. Now, taking a look at this year's theme for the campaign against violence, it says Orange the World, and brings up issues such as funding, response, you've talked about response, prevention, you've talked a bit about that, and then collection, which is collection of data. First of all, before I get to funding, let me ask, is it easy to get data of what's happening? Then again, would you say it's on the increase or it's coming down? Cases.
When we first began, we had believed that the issues were coming down, that we were making progressive progress in the fight, until the COVID-19 pandemic came up and the government declared a lockdown. And then all of a sudden, we realized that the issue was far from reducing, because there were escalation of issues, of reports. You would hear some and your ears will tingle, and you will hear some and your heart will skip. It was not limited to rape. Domestic violence was on the increase, and not everybody had the opportunity to be out and about to do what they had to do because of the lockdown. But those who had passes for essential services were still doing their job. I will not know how easy it was for them to do their jobs, but they were still doing their jobs. And I would not also know how easy it was for matters like this to be reported, considering the restriction.
Okay.
But the number of cases came on the increase, and so we knew we needed to start all over again in the fight.
Okay. Now, on the issue of funding, because to campaign for such an issue, to advocate against such an issue, there is need for funds. Do you have any challenges in that way, or is it you have it all?
Fund will always be an issue. Fund is a scarce commodity. Even when you think you have funds, like I told you as you start, you encounter challenges that you didn't anticipate, and you find out that the fund you had earmarked for a particular process has to be shared, and of course it can never be enough. But thank God we have somebodies that have partnered with us. But then what they are bringing is not still enough, considering new challenges that are opened to us. For instance, right now we thought we had a GBV center that could shelter some of these survivors, at least temporarily, until they are emotionally stabilized and can then be released to go back and we pursue the process of justice.
Okay.
But with the surge of cases during the pandemic, we discovered that our 2-room safe shelter is not able to cope. Sometimes before you know it, the place is full, and then you have more cases coming, and some of the survivors come face to face with threats from the perpetrators of this act. They will threaten the families, they will threaten all manner of threats. And so for the survivors not to give up and say, hey, I surrender, what you do is you take them from that environment and put them in a place where they can feel safe to open up and to say, okay, yeah, I'm ready to face the process, whatever it is. And many a times we have had to find ourselves sharing a little funding for medical checks for these survivors, with having to relocate them to a permanent a shelter somewhere else when our own is full. That in itself is very limiting. That in itself does not allow us to go at the full speed that we would have wanted or would have loved to take on this fight. But we're grateful for even the little that is coming from well-wishers, from organized bodies who also have a stake in this particular issue of gender-based violence. We've had support in establishing our safe shelter. We've had support from UNFPA that at least supported us in setting up that center. They've supported us to fund some of our advocacy programs, even though it is not enough. So why would I say? I would say funding is never enough. We are still asking for people to support us to fund this particular subhead of our fight in GBV.
Okay. And earlier on, you did say there's need for a communal fight. What are your expectations from the society at large, different sectors of the society, in the fight against all forms of violence?
Number one, it's everybody's fight. It could be my child today. Well, what will you do if you stand aloof and watch me fight alone? When it comes to your turn, what will you do? The traditional rulers have a major role to play. In the past, you will see them invoking traditional injunctions on people like that. I remember when I was growing up as a child, when you go against the norms and the value of your community, sometimes they will ostracize you. And nobody wanted to be ostracized from his or her community. And so everybody tried to uphold the value of the community in which they belonged or lived in. And I want to believe that if the traditional rulers will lend their voices to the fight that is ongoing, that the people will be faster in accepting and believing that whatever they are doing to perpetrate this act is against humanity and it is against the custom of their community. Two, on the part of the government, what do they need to do? Bring out policies and laws that will help, which is what the government of Akwa Ibom State has done by the governors assenting to the VAP act or law, whatever it is. And now the police officers or the police force, they are the law enforcement agents. I cannot go to make arrests. I can identify where a problem is, but I still would need them to come backed up with the authority that formed them to be able to make the arrest. That's their duty. I cannot prosecute. It is their responsibility to also prosecute. And now you're looking at the judiciary. What is their role? They have to do their part. You know, sometimes we've had cases running for 4 years. We're still pursuing. But, and you know that every of these cases involves finances, transport, one thing or the other. And then if one case has to drag for 4 years, for an ordinary rural dweller or ordinary survivor of this, they will say the trouble is too much. I am the one who is offended here. I am the one who is also going through this prolonged process, and I am the one who is also expending my scarce finances. And so they easily tell you, I give up. Let God, you know.
Take the fight.
Yeah, that's right. But if on the part of the judiciary they make the time frame for GBV matters within what is bearable, I think we will make more progress. And if also you are privileged as a community member to witness such going on, and you're willing to speak up, it will help. The community leaders, you know, we've gone to one community to go and pick up a GBV survivor. And everybody was running. Nobody wants to even bring the girl for us to take to the hospital. Meanwhile, this girl is bleeding. She's not able to get up. She has not eaten. And the hospital where she was first taken to by a journalist says she needed some pint of blood. The family said they cannot afford it. And the information has come to us and we said, okay, come. Let's go back and get this treatment. And the family is saying, no, we don't want to be involved. We don't want for you people to come and ask us questions because we don't want them to drive us out of this community. How? And then I had to go to the youth leader who now helped us to secure the arrest of the perpetrator. And so if everybody know that they have a part to play, I think the job will be a lot easier, and the perpetrators of this act will come to know that everybody in the society frowns at it and no one will applaud such act. And so when you know you are alone in it, you will think twice before you get involved in it.
Alright, in case you're just joining us, this is Centerpoint AM45 and I'm being joined by the Coordinator of Family Empowerment and Youth Reorientation Path Initiative, Mrs. Ime Inyang. And we're talking about elimination of violence against women and of course the male gender and children. This is in light of the 16 days activism campaign against violence on women. It began on the 25th of November and tomorrow that campaign will be concluded, but the fight continues. We'll now take a quick break. On the heels of that, we'll be getting into another dimension of this conversation. Do stay with us on the program. Project of Our Excellency Dr. Martha Emmanuel, and this morning my guest is the coordinator of FEYReP, Mrs. Ime Inyang. Thanks for staying with us, and thanks for having been our guest. So quickly, let's take a look at FEYReP in the past 5 years. I know the year 2020 it began with so much high hopes, so much anticipation, but along the line, the lockdown, the COVID-19 pandemic and all of that, did that affect the vision of FEYReP in any way?
Well, of course it couldn't have affected the vision of FEYReP, but it only helped FEYReP to know that it can't dispense with its services by devising new methods. And that's why if you look through our Martha's Diary for this year, we've tried to catalog the challenges that we have encountered in discharging our duties in the year of COVID-19, if you permit me to call it so.
Yeah.
We were still working.
Okay.
We had to temporarily diversify to giving out COVID-19 palliative to some of the rural dwellers, and that would have FEYReP staff going from house to house to do that, because you will find out that if we're trying to empower women, Her Excellency is trying to give them starter packs, grants to start up a business so that they can have a stable family where the mother and the father would have to bring in income to support the children. During the pandemic or the lockdown, where nobody was going out, you can imagine how hard life was going to be. And Her Excellency, being a very proactive person, had anticipated that such was going to be the challenge of these families. And so she quickly went to work by ensuring that help palliatives were sent to these people in form of food and little tokens of cash to help them go through that time. Everybody, of course, went online. They had to change strategy, but they didn't stop the services. Of course, many meetings that we had to hold had to be done online, and we encouraged people to reach out to us by phone, and we also ensure that we, instead of doing large congregational empowerment, we broke them down in smaller batches so that we could observe the social distancing and the new tradition of the COVID-19 era. But we were still working, we were still reaching out to people, we were still giving out shelter for the homeless, we were still empowering people to get to do something so that they can support the family. We're still doing things to add value. We're still paying hospital bills for the less privileged and those who would not ordinarily be able to afford it.
Okay.
Because these challenges wouldn't say because there's a lockdown it wouldn't come. It would come and it will have to be sorted. So FEYReP's vision was not affected, just that the strategy of reaching out was the only thing that changed during that time.
So in essence, FEYReP is still in the business of adding value to lives.
That is the core essence of FEYReP. It cannot change. If that changes, it means FEYReP has stopped existing, which of course you know. We intend to be around for a very long time.
Okay. Now, taking a look at the global recession, what is FEYReP doing to empower women? Are there any plans on ground at the moment?
Of course, like I told you, when you start a process or a movement or anything, all the challenges will not come to the table. Some of the challenges you have to only realize it when you have begun and you just see them coming. And with the coming of the pandemic, we had to go back to the drawing board, and Her Excellency came up with a program of floating the cooperative, FEYReP Multipurpose Cooperative Society, where she intends to chart a better pathway for financial and economic independence for the people in the rural areas. And right now, hopefully by next week, that program will be launched, still in the year of this COVID-19 pandemic. So we haven't stopped.
Okay. and who gets to be part of this program? Which women of Akwa Ibom State gets to be part of this program?
If you are a business person, you're already doing something. If you have the desire to want to do something, you are eligible.
Okay.
You are eligible to apply for it.
Okay. They need to apply for it.
Oh yes.
What's the mode of application? Through which medium?
Oh, we have focal persons
Okay.
in each of the local government areas, and then they go to business places like the market to see what you're doing, and then of course you know that this multi-purpose cooperative is not compulsory; it's by choice,
Okay.
because interest-free loans will be handed out to members. It is not free. It's not a grant. It is a loan. It means that it must be repaid back
Okay.
to the coffers of FEYReP.
Okay.
But the only thing there is that it does not attract any interest,
Okay.
but it will only help you to make all the profits that you need
Okay.
to
And
grow
that's
your
coming up-
business.
That's coming up on the 15th.
That's coming up on the 15th of this month,
Okay.
hopefully.
Okay. So look out for the focal person of FEYReP in your local government if you want to be part of the FEYReP multi-purpose cooperative society, which will be inaugurated on the 15th of December. Thank you so very much, ma'am, for having being part of Centerpoint AM45.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, and with that, we've come full cycle on Centerpoint AM45. I want to thank you so very much for having been part of the program, and we look forward to you joining us next week, Wednesday, for another compelling edition of the program. Meanwhile, keep enjoying more programs from the Ultimate in TV broadcasting. From me, it's good morning.